As we've been discerning the calendar and also the lunar Sabbath, or lunar determination of the Sabbath, I've been led to just read a little bit more about Sabbath. And so that's what I'm going to do in this video. Exodus 16:23. Now, I typed in Shabbat because I wanted to understand is there any different way that Shabbat is being used? And so the version that comes up is the HNV. Apparently, this is known as the Hebrew Names version. So we're going to take a look at it. We're going to see if anything different pops up here. I also noticed as I'm reading through it that there's Shabbat and then there's Shabbatot. I've looked this up several different places, and it seems like it just means the same thing. It just means Sabbath. Now, I admittedly early on thought that Shabbat actually meant a Saturday Sabbath. I'm kind of in a way embarrassed to admit that, but at the same time, who cares? The only thing that matters is that I'm being brought into truth. Shabbat means Sabbath. That's it. There is no Saturday in the Bible, and that month, the way that weeks are constructed as a continuous 7-day periods until they come to a year, is not what God established. God established the new moon as a rest day. He has separated his days into rest and work days. New moon is the first day of the month, a rest day. And so there's 6 days from new moon, or between new moon and the first 7th day Sabbath. So the first 7th day Sabbath is going to land on the 8th of God's month. Then there'll be another 6 days of work, and then another Sabbath on the 15th, another 6 days of work, and another Sabbath on the 22nd, another 6 days of work and a Sabbath on the 29th. On the 30th day, there will be a day of work, and then you start the month over. First day, day of rest, then 6 days of work, day of rest, another 6 days, day of rest. Okay, and so the moon actually is regulating these ordinances, and we're told that. Just so happens that we're told this first of all, we're told in Psalm 89:37 that it will be established forever like the moon, the faithful witness in the sky. So the moon is the faithful witness in the sky. That's going to get us back on track. And then in Jeremiah 31:35, we're told that the sun is gives light by day, and the ordinances means statutes, commands, etc., what God has ordained, the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. Now, I'm kind of interested in that statement right there, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar, because of the fact that God divided the sea. I'm kind of interested in that, the significance of the moon with regard to that. So it's just a prayer in my heart right now. Lord, if you want to reveal something to me, you want to continue to move me, I'm open and I'm listening. In this video, though, we're going to take a look at how Shabbat is used in Scripture. Exodus 16:23, he said to them, "This is that which the Lord has spoken." If only I could do bloopers in these videos, you guys would crack up at some of the ways I trip over my own tongue. Okay, so, I just deleted myself saying tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow is a solemn rest, a holy Shabbat to the Lord. Bake that which you want to bake, and boil that which you want to boil. And all that remains over, lay up for yourselves to be kept until the morning. Exodus 16:25, Moshe said, "Eat that today, for today is a Shabbat to the Lord. Today you shall not find it in the field." 16:26, 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day is the Shabbat. In it there shall be none. Verse 29, "Behold, because the Lord has given you the Shabbat, therefore he gives you on the 6th day the bread of 2 days. Everyone stay in his place, let no one go out of his place on the 7th day. Exodus 28, remember the day of Shabbat to keep it holy. Okay, hopefully, I'm not needing to pause to explain things to you. Like, we stay in our houses. We don't go out on the 7th day. We don't go and try to gather or shop or do anything else. We are required to prepare on the 6th day This is why in the word, the sixth day is called the day of preparation. We are supposed to prepare so that we can make provision for us to be able to observe God's Sabbath and keep it holy. Exodus 20, verse 10. But the seventh day is a Shabbat to the Lord your God. You shall do no work in it, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. So everyone who is within your care, that means that you don't have, and I had to deal with this at one time, you don't have contractors or workers coming over on Sabbath and then you're like, oh, but I can't do anything because this is my Sabbath. Now you're presenting a stumbling block to someone else. Is this going to be to your credit? No one who is within your gates, within your care. Remember that Abraham wasn't like, oh, well, those are just my slaves. I'm not going to include them in the covenant. No, he went back and circumcised his slaves. He cared for the people God placed in his care. And Reform Judaism, or at least from what I've seen, many will have servants in their house to prepare the dinner, turn on the lights for them, turn off the lights for, do all of this stuff for them. They will desecrate the Sabbath even worse because they're placing a stumbling block between, they're not caring for other people. How are you going to claim to be the light of the world when you're doing that? We are to set an example. So what God has told me is you just need to make that plainly known. When I first started working with the realtor on the building to sell the building, that was one of the first things I said. I observe Sabbath. The building will not be shown on Sabbath. It can be shown any other day but Sabbath. All right, verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and eretz, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the day of Shabbat and made it holy. Oh, I want to say something about this, by the way. There's a lot of people saying Shabbat Shalom. And I'm going to guess that that's because they think that there's something powerful in being an ethnic Jew. God established a nation, a nationality, to help you to understand, to help us to understand what it is to be a nation set apart from other nations. Shabbat Shalom is not in the Bible, guys. I don't know why people are saying this, but I believe the reason they're saying this is because they are following ethnic Jews and conflating what it means to be a spiritual Jew, one set apart from other nations. If you are Christian, if you're truly Christian, that means you're circumcised in heart and you are a spiritual Jew. A Jew was never reduced to an ethnicity. Moreover, Romans 11:28 says, as far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies for your sake. But as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs. Who's Paul talking about? Is he talking about ethnic Jews? No, because there were ethnic Jews who became Christian. What he's talking about are those who continued in Judaism after the Messiah was sent, because the Messiah being here fulfilled the law, and now we are referred to as Christians, those of us who have accepted the Messiah, received the Messiah, loved the Messiah, and have entered into that covenant. That's what Paul was saying. By the way, the first Christians were of Jewish ethnicity. Do not conflate ethnicity with religion. Paul is not speaking about ethnicity. Ethnicity is spoken of in the Bible because people were saying we're sons of Abraham just because they had a particular ethnicity. But what Paul is talking about right here is religion. Those who didn't even believe in God, it was obvious that they didn't believe in God because they rejected the Messiah. They didn't have love for God in their hearts, and that's why they were hardened. So they continue to refer to themselves as Jews in religion because they did not accept Christ. Does that mean that the Old Testament has been abolished? Does that mean that the Old Testament is only relevant to them? That's just such a stupid doctrine. You cannot understand the New Testament or why Jesus even came, and you can't receive it if you don't understand the Old Testament. And the same is true for the Old Testament. You can't understand it without the New Testament. You can't obey your covenant without the full Bible. There is nothing in the Bible that is not relevant to us. What we are supposed to be entering is God's rest. Shabbat Shalom is not in the word. It comes from Reform Judaism and rabbinical commentary. What you are telling me when you use that language is that you are speaking on somebody else's authority and continuing in a practice that is a prostitution. Sabbath is about entering God's rest, which means that you are restored to him. And yes, a result of that is you end up having the peace of his spirit. But you don't have peace just because you're not working for the day. So this is really a counterfeit way of expressing the significance of Sabbath. If you want to give someone a greeting or a blessing, then talk about the actual significance of Sabbath, which is, I don't know, sometimes I'll say, I hope you are able to enter his rest. I don't even think people really stop to think about some of the things they say, like when they're just idly saying, oh, praise God, oh, praise God. Are you praising God, or are you just thinking that you're praising him because you're saying that statement all the time? We need to be thinking about the words that are coming out of our mouths, and the reason why is because it's coming from our heart. So if what we're doing is speaking in idle chatter, idle, superficial, empty chatter, holy creator, this is the day you have made, that kind of thing, you haven't connected with God. You're not glorifying God. You're not bearing his image. You're making a mockery. Now, I'm not talking about the words. If you truly mean those words in your heart, but that's not the way you talk to other people, is it? It's not the way I talk to you. Do I change my tone like that to become all grandiose and weird? No, I don't change my tone. And I speak with God with reverence and respect and with authenticity. So it's not just about the words coming out of your mouth. It's about the expression. And everyone knows when you're doing stuff like that, Jesus rebuked it. Don't be standing on the corners, praying for everyone to hear with these long prayers and everything else. That is what that is when people are doing that. Your tone shouldn't necessarily change from when you're talking to one person to when you're talking to God. If you're a real person who's connecting with God, that's kind of like my daughter showing up at my house and me being like, oh, my daughter is here. I just love you so much. Oh, and my grandson too has arrived. That's what that's like. It's a lie. You think my daughter's going to feel loved because I'm talking like that? She's going to want to check my temperature. So let's be real. Exodus 31:13. Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, most assuredly you shall keep my Shabbatot, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. You shall keep the Shabbat, same thing, Sabbath. Therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. Do you guys take that seriously or not? Because I feel like people just don't take this seriously anymore. They're like, oh, it's been fulfilled. That means it's been abolished, even though Jesus said he made the clear distinction between fulfillment and abolishment in his statement when he says, I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. There's fulfillment in the meaning. There's fulfillment with love, still required to observe. I take that to be a very serious statement. You shall keep the Shabbat. Therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. That's serious business. Now listen to what is said. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Shabbat of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the day of Shabbat shall surely be put to death. Therefore, the children of Israel shall keep the Shabbat, to observe the Shabbat throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. Are you a child of Israel? Are you a child of Yisrael? Does Paul tell you not all who are descended from Israel are Israel? Does he tell you not all who are descended from Abraham are Abraham's children? Not all who are Jews outwardly are Jews inwardly. But one is a Jew only through circumcision. So if you want to be in this covenant and you want to be saved, these are the things that you have to do. This is the covenant. And not one jot or tittle, not the least stroke of a pen, has disappeared from the law. And those who teach those who teach others to disregard the least of the commands that Jesus talked about that have been established in the law, they will not make it into the kingdom of heaven. That's what Jesus said. Exodus 35:2, 6 days shall work be done, but on the seventh day there shall be a holy day for you, a Shabbat of solemn rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work in it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations on the day of Shabbat. I'm still trying to really discern this, because does that mean, like if you have a furnace, you have fire. So does this mean that I can't turn on my heater in winter? Does it mean that I can't turn on the microwave because now we have different technology that doesn't require a fire? Like, what does this mean? I'll be curious to hear what you guys have to say about that. I have a friend also, we have a friend in the assembly who lives in a house where she has a wood stove and she has mini splits throughout her very large house. And if you run those mini splits, it's going to cost like $800 a month to heat your house. So when there was this ice storm in Oregon, should she not turn that stove on? I mean, it does kind of sound like it. Like we're not supposed to be doing that. So everyone needs to be convicted and pray and discern with God. It's really just a period of like 24 hours. Leviticus 16:31. It is a Shabbat of solemn rest to you, and you shall afflict your souls. It is a statute forever. Do you know what he's talking about right here? The Day of Atonement. And you know what? We had someone in this assembly who was in a cult, would not let go of these other people that she was hanging out with, who were telling her that the Day of Atonement has already been fulfilled and therefore it's been abolished. Therefore, you don't observe it anymore. Well, you can see in the book of Acts that they were observing, and that was after the sacrifice of Jesus. You can see right here that it says, it is a Shabbat of solemn rest to you, and you shall afflict your souls. It is a statute forever. You guys got to question these teachings, and you have to be a watchman. You have to be willing to say something. That person was not willing to say anything, and when she was confronted about it, said, well, I'm scared. I mean, after almost 2 years of hearing the truth, she was still scared. If you are afraid of man before being afraid of God, you're not going to make it. Leviticus 19:3. Each of you shall respect his mother and his father. You shall keep my Shabbatot. I am the Lord your God. Verse 30. You shall keep my Shabbatot and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. Leviticus 23:3. 6 days you shall work be done. But on the seventh day is a Shabbat of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of work. It is a Shabbat to the Lord in all your dwellings. Verse 11. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you on the next day after the Shabbat. The Cohen shall wave it. That's the priest. And they're referring to the Festival of Weeks. Okay, so now that we know, and we're still discerning, by the way, the year. So 30-day months, 360-day years. We know the Sabbath dates now. So we know the 8th, the 15th, 22nd, and 29th. So we know that this is going to occur on the day after one of those days, either the 9th, the 16th, the 23rd, or the 30th. So we'll be discerning this next, but my brain is so melted. I think I need like a little bit of a break in order to discern these. But he'll move me according to when he wants to reveal these things. Verse 15, you shall count from the next day after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, even Shabbatot shall be completed. Verse 16, even to the next day after the seventh Sabbath, you shall number 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering to the Lord. Verse 32, it shall be a Shabbat of solemn rest for you, and you shall deny yourselves in the 9th day of the month. At evening, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Shabbat. Verse 37, these are the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, a burnt offering and a meal offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, each on its own day, besides the Shabbatot of the Lord, and besides your gifts, and besides all your vows, and besides all your free will offerings, which you give to the Lord. Leviticus 24, verse 8. Every Shabbat day he shall set it in order before the Lord continually. It is on behalf of the children of Israel, an everlasting covenant. Okay, this is setting the bread out, the table of bread. Leviticus 25, 2. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Shabbat to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in the fruits of it. But in the 7th year shall be a Shabbat of solemn rest for the land, a Shabbat to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. Did you know that we actually have a Sabbath year in the Bible? We're going to have to discern this, but I do believe that Sabbath year was would have correlated with 2021 to the early part of 2022. If you have heard that there is this Sabbath year, like you heard this, maybe you were listening to Reform Judaism by mistake initially. Maybe you've been doing it recently and now you're realizing, maybe shouldn't be doing that. They've added to the scroll. They've added a calendar. God only gave one calendar. He didn't give two calendars. And they start that Sabbath year with the month that they call Tishrei, which, by the way, is a Babylonian name. It's not the name that God uses for that month. God uses the name Ethanim for the 7th month. And they claim that is the creation calendar, and that the calendar that begins with Aviv, Abib, or Nisan, that calendar is called the Exodus calendar. No, that's not what the word says. The word does not say that. So that's why I say that it began in 2021 and ended in early 2022 in the month of Aviv, or called Nisan, or sometimes Abib. And that's it. That's when God's calendar begins. I don't know what in the world people are thinking, or why they even, I think that people just aren't following, they're not reading the word, and they're just following what rabbinical commentary is saying. I was admittedly doing that. In the beginning, I really thought that binge watching YouTube videos and stuff like that I was just going to catch up for years of not knowing. And really what I was doing was I was catching up on years of counterfeit Christianity and counterfeit Judaism. And God corrected me. He brought me back to the word, and he started showing me that what people were saying was absolutely false, because you just can't reconcile what they're teaching with the actual word. Personally, I think what's going to happen, the way that I see this going down, is that people are going to start saying that people like me are actually anti-Semitic because we're actually talking about religion, a difference of religion. We're not talking about ethnicity, because there are plenty of ethnic Jews who are Christian and do not ascribe to these things. What I'm addressing is counterfeit religion. But I have a feeling that the narrative is going to go in this direction of, the people who are saying what I'm saying are going to be labeled anti-Semitic. And you see that that's what's going on right now. That's the narrative. If you don't support what these people are doing in Israel, then you're anti-Semitic. If you don't support the genocide of Palestinians. So one life is worth more than the other life, apparently. It's just pathetic. Leviticus 25, verse 6. The Shabbat of the land shall be food for you, and for your servant, and for your maid, and for your hired servant, and for your stranger who lives as a foreigner with you. For your cattle and for the animals that are in your land, shall all the increase of it be for food. You shall number 7 Shabbatot of years to you, 7 times 7 years, and there shall be to you the days of 7 Shabbatot of years, even 49 years. So you're counting down the same way that you would be counting down the Festival of Weeks. You're counting down years. Oh, there's just so much to learn. It's it's so fun and interesting when God's unfolding all of this. And as he gives you one piece of truth, it starts to open up a whole world of understanding in another area. So it's really exciting. You shall keep my Shabbatot and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. That's 26 verse 2. And then 34 says, then shall the land enjoy its Shabbatot as long as it lies desolate and you are in your enemy's land. Now, Leviticus 26, God talks about blessing for obedience, and then he talks about punishment for disobedience. And that's what he's referencing here. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen to you. Then shall the land enjoy its Shabbatot as long as it lies desolate and you are in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy its Shabbatot. As long as it lies desolate, it shall have rest, even the rest which it didn't have in your Shabbatot when you lived in it. Verse 43, the land also shall be left by them, and it shall enjoy its Shabbatot while it lies desolate without them, and they shall accept of the punishment of their iniquity, because they rejected my ordinances, and their soul abhorred my statutes. Oh boy, yeah, Christians got it coming. I'm telling you. It's going to be bad news bears, because no one even cares about this. I can't even tell people that Christmas is pagan. Like, I can't even say that to people without them just completely not caring about truth. How would they ever even accept what I'm saying? You got to take a whole year off. No one cares about this. Deuteronomy 5:12, observe the day of Shabbat to keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Shabbat to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of the cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates, that your manservant and your maidservant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Mitzrayim, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the day of Shabbat. Then in 2 Kings 4:23 it says, why will you go to him today? It's neither new moon nor Shabbat. She said, it shall be well. So this is the wife who was going to go to, I think it was Elijah. And I think her child had died. But the implication here is that these are the days that they were going to the prophet, either on new moon or on Sabbath. That's when it was common to go and consult with the prophet. Okay, the next one that I come to is 2 Chronicles 8:12. Then Shlomo, okay, now in this, we're in the HNV, remember, so we're talking about Solomon. Then Shlomo offered burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar of the Lord, which he had built before the porch, even as the duty of every day required, offering according to the mitzvah of Moshe, so the command of Moses, on the Shabbatot and on the new moons and on the set feasts 3 times a year, even in the feast of Matzah. Matzah just means bread, so we're talking about the festival of unleavened bread, and in the Feast of Weeks and in the Feast of Booths. The reason why I selected this passage is because what we see here is that all of these things are being, all of these commands and appointed times are being set together. And I think that, when we look at Sabbath, a lot of the time we kind of minimize Sabbath, like these other feast days are more important. For example, like the Moadim, what's referred to as the Moadim, the Passover, Festival of Weeks, and the Festival of Tabernacles, those are all commanded, you're commanded to do a pilgrimage to the temple. And that's why it says 3 times a year. But it's not that those days are necessarily more important. I mean, they're referred to as high Sabbaths or special Sabbaths when you see that like a 7th-day Sabbath falls on the same, is the same Sabbath as a feast day, for example. I should probably say that the other way. Like a feast day Sabbath is falling on the same day as the 7th-day Sabbath. But each week should really be regarded in a similar way. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, we make all of this preparation and make a big deal about these other days, but we just kind of think like Sabbath isn't that big of a deal. That's really what I'm feeling from this. The more I'm getting to study the calendar and getting to understand how God has established this, I just feel more and more like this is so important, and this is something that I really need to bring attention to and be intentional about. Especially like even, I don't know if this means anything to you, but just like the fact that he assigned a different phase of the moon to each Sabbath is just incredible. That he would assign that and that we would have that witness in the sky, letting us know that this is his Sabbath. So here we see that there's like a duty in terms of sacrifice that was required every day, but then on these particular days, something more was required. And with us being the sacrifice, I think we really need to think about what does that actually mean? What more is being required of us on these particular days? Because yes, we have to work the fields, so to speak, clean our houses, bake our bread, the things that they would have been doing. which my life seems to become my life just has become more of that as I've been studying what God established, because to be honest, I don't enjoy living in a concrete jungle and, this rat race out here. I don't enjoy it at all. I don't want any part of it. I'm so separated from it. I enjoy having my fruit trees, my garden. I enjoy, baking my own sourdough bread, sewing clothes. I have fun doing stuff like that. And you know what? That was not my life at all. I was the CEO. I mean, I guess I'm still the CEO of my corporation, even though I don't really do anything with it. But I was the CEO of my own corporation. I had 3 successful businesses, a full staff, a building. I went out dancing probably at least 3 nights a week. I was a very worldly woman, and I am a completely different creation. So I think we need to think about the way that we're living during the week, the way that we are presenting ourselves to God on these days. And as a body, we do that. We present ourselves as offerings every time that we're coming together. Another thing that you really do need to take some time to consider, if this is not something that you've understood previously, but in the Word, when we're talking about Sabbath, God commands through Paul in 1 Corinthians 14 that each of us is to bring something to Sabbath assembly. So what the structure of counterfeit Christian churches is contrary to what the Word actually says. Each of us is to bring a hymn, a word of instruction, a tongue. We're supposed to be used as an offering when we come together, and an offering to the body to bring something that God has built in us. And that is not happening in counterfeit churches. In counterfeit churches, what I see is that people they always think that somebody else is going to do the work for them. It's like you got the counterfeit covenant where counterfeit Christians think that some ethnic group is going to bear the covenant for them. Some priest is going to forgive you on what? Is going to forgive you how? They're the intercessor to God, that you're going to pay some money and pay your indulgences, and that will absolve you. And then you can go right back out and do the same darn thing that some counterfeit shepherd at a pulpit is going to present your offering. Where's your offering? You're just sitting on your rear end in a congregation, literally not contributing anything. How is that biblical, guys? There's nothing biblical about that. Read 1 Corinthians 14, verse 26. What then shall we say, brothers and sisters? When you come together, each of you has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Everything must be done so that the church may be built up. If anyone speaks in a tongue, 2 or at the most 3 should speak, one at a time, and someone must interpret. If there's no interpreter, the speaker should keep quiet in the church and speak to himself and to God. By the way, he's talking to brothers and sisters. The original word means fellow believers. And so a couple paragraphs down, when he says women should be quiet in the church, is a totally false interpretation of the scroll. Listen to the statement. Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. The word is wives, because not all women have a husband. And in the OJB version, it's very clear that wives were blurting out over their husbands and they were creating disorder in worship. Otherwise, the paragraph is nonsensical. And the same thing goes for that Timothy passage that people like to cite in order to malign women and make them seem like they're just stupid and should shut up. Don't you get carried away in that nonsense. It's false doctrine. It is satanic. Everyone has the same covenant. In the kingdom of heaven, there's neither male nor female. So this is just a lie. All right, in Psalm 92, verse 1, is a song for the day of Shabbat. So this is going to give us some understanding of the heart that we should have for God's Sabbaths. It is a good thing to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises to your name, Elion, to proclaim your loving kindness in the morning and your faithfulness every night, with the 10-stringed lute, with the harp, and with the melody of the lyre. For you, Lord, have made me glad through your work. I will triumph in the work of your hands. How great are your works, Lord! Your thoughts are very deep. A senseless man doesn't know, neither does a fool understand this. Though the wicked spring up as the grass, and all the evildoers flourish, they will be destroyed forever. But you, Lord, are on high forevermore. For behold your enemies, Lord, for behold your enemies shall perish, and all the evildoers will be scattered. But you have exalted my horn, like that of the wild ox. I am anointed with fresh oil. Okay, the oil is for consecration. My eye has also seen my enemies. My ears have heard of the wicked enemies who rise up against me. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. He will grow like a cedar in Lebanon. They are planted in the Lord's house. They will flourish in our God's courts. They will still bring forth fruit in old age. They will be full of sap and green, to show that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. So it really sounds like a song of praise. So we have a couple of things. We have presenting the offering, and we have praise, and we have under the fulfillment of presenting the offering, which is us showing up as an offering. That is not happening in counterfeit churches, and it is God's command to assemble. So if you're not doing that, you should be going back to God and praying and asking him, how do I do this? How do I observe your commands? Is this what you require? If you just decide that you're just not going to do anything about that, you're not in the covenant, guys. The New Testament says, assemble even more as the day approaches. How can you possibly be in the covenant? How can anybody say that you can observe Sabbath on any day, or that you can just assemble with your family, delude yourself into thinking, oh, I'm going to assemble with my BFF, I'm going to assemble with my family and not care about the body? You're not in the body. Like you're in your family. That's what you are. And in that way, you're not even leading your family correctly. You need to be connecting with the rest of God's body. And if your family is not on board with that, then you need to make the decision that you're going to do what God requires and that you're going to be used in order to set an example for your family. And they'll become curious about what you're doing when they start seeing that you're changing. Now listen to what God says. So you tell me, you continue to choose to go to a counterfeit church. You tell me if it's going to be to your credit. Isaiah 1:13, bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moons, Shabbatot, and convocations I can't bear with evil assemblies. Think about it. Now listen to what he says in Isaiah 56. Verse 4, for thus says the Lord, the eunuchs who keep my Shabbatot and choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, to them I will give in my house and within my walls a memorial and a name better than that of sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone who keeps my Shabbat from profaning it, keeps the Shabbat from profaning it and holds fast my covenant. Even them I will bring into the holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. So this is just interesting. Like God is saying the eunuch and the foreigner will be given a name better and a memorial better than that of sons and daughters. Do you understand? Like, this is just stupid that people are saying that there is an ethnicity that doesn't believe in him, that does not believe in his word, but manipulates the word for their own agenda, and that's who's going to be honored before God? It's just contrary to what the word says. How is this such a pervasive lie in counterfeit Christianity? Because people don't love truth, that's why. But here's God's promise. Isaiah 58 verse 13. If you turn away your foot from the Shabbat, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Shabbat a delight, and the holy of the Lord honorable, and shall honor it, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then shall you delight yourself in the Lord. And I will make you to ride on the high places of the Eretz, the earth, and I will feed you with the heritage of Yaakov, your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. God is acknowledging that this is a difficult thing to do, and yet he's not saying, don't worry about it. You could just change my day around. Go ahead, just do whatever you want because I know that this is difficult. He's not saying that. He's acknowledging that it's difficult, and he's saying, if you're going to suffer from me this way and you turn from the things that you want to do, you're going to be blessed. And then there are multiple times in Scripture where God sets his Sabbath and new moon in reference to each other. Amos 8:5 is one. Here, Isaiah 66:23, it shall happen that from one new moon to another and from one Shabbat to another shall all flesh come to worship before me, says the Lord. But then he says in Jeremiah 17:27, but if you will not listen to me to make the day of Shabbat holy and not to bear a burden and enter in at the gates of Jerusalem on the day of Shabbat, then I will kindle a fire in the gates of it, and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem, and it shall not be quenched. He's going to destroy the city. Also, by the way, we're the city. Then listen to what he says in Lamentations 2:6. He has violently taken away his tent as if it were a garden. He has destroyed his place of assembly. The Lord has caused solemn assembly and Shabbat to be forgotten in Zion. He has despised in the indignation of his anger the king and the Cohen, the priest. So he has removed these days, these feast days, and his Sabbath from these people who have not entered his rest, who have not been willing to withhold from themselves for him. This is the reason why we're trying to get back to it, because it's been removed. The Antichrist didn't steal this from God. God gave permission to the Antichrist because God's people didn't love him enough to stick to his commands. Exodus 20:12. Moreover also, I gave them my Shabbatot to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. And that really is what he's doing. I mean, if you're observing this, then you know that what you're doing is when you're withholding from yourself and you're saying, oh, but I need the technology, and you keep like wanting to go check your phone or eat or do things to distract yourself, then you start to realize where you need to be cleaned up, don't you? You start to realize, oh my goodness, what did I do this week that I so succumbed to the flesh that I can't like enter God's rest right now? I need to take a look at this. What have I been doing? What have I been distracting myself with? And you go and you examine yourself. What needs to be different? Like, what's going on? Are you distracting yourself because there's something emotional going on in your life that you're trying to avoid dealing with and receiving God's ministry on? It truly is a sanctifying process to observe Sabbath. And part of sanctification, by the way, is consecration. There's a cleansing process, and there's also a setting apart. So as David said in the Psalm, that he pours fresh oil on you. You need to be set apart to God. But during the week, when we start, getting into old behavior and distracting ourselves or whatever else it is that we're ending up doing to succumb to the flesh, we're starting to pull away from him. And so to have this every 7 days creates in us checks and balances. You're not going to get far from God if that's what you're truly doing. Because each week you're going to start to say, wow, okay, what did I do? Or wow, I did a good job this week because I'm able to really enter his rest. And you're going to start to realize that most of your life, like your whole life is supposed to be a fast to God. Your whole life is supposed to be you consecrating yourself to him. And throughout the week, you're going to start to realize and be moved to put down the things that you were using before. I mean, there was a time when I couldn't even imagine going to sleep without the TV on. Do you know how long it's been since I've watched the TV? I have a 65-inch TV in my back house. I haven't even turned it on in like 2 years, I think. And the last thing we turned it on for, I think, was probably a home movie. Because what is there to watch? Literally nothing. So your life is going to change. It has to change. You can't keep living the same life. God says that your covenant is to become holy as he is holy. And there's a lot of work to be done. Work that you don't even know. Like, I don't even know. I really thought that I had, gotten to a certain place. I mean, I've given up a lot for God. But I'm not there. There's a long way for him to take me. And I'll tell you one thing that's really humbling is realizing that I've been doing this for a year and a half, and to realize how much falsehood he's had to take out of me and how much correction I've had to make. And listen, it's part of the testimony that he's using. That's what he has ordained. But I kind of thought, okay, well, when I'm speaking that testimony, that it's just going to be clean. There's not going to be any correction. Oh my goodness. There's so much correction that has to be made. So much counterfeit Christianity that has to come out of us. All right, now listen to what God says. Exodus 20, verse 12. Moreover, also, I gave them my Shabbatot to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They didn't walk in my statutes, and they rejected my ordinances, which if a man keep, he shall live in them. And my Shabbatot they greatly profaned. Then I said I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to consume them. But I worked for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I brought them out. Moreover, also, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land, which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands, because they rejected my ordinances and didn't walk in my statutes, and they profaned my Shabbatot, for their heart went after their idols. Nevertheless, my eye spared them, and I didn't destroy them, neither did I make a full end of them in the wilderness. I said to their children in the wilderness, don't you walk in the statutes of your fathers, neither observe their ordinances, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and do them, and make my Shabbatot holy, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. They shall be a sign between me and you. This is part of your covenant. But the children rebelled against me. They didn't walk in my statutes, neither kept the ordinances to do them, which if a man do, he shall live in them. They profaned my Shabbatot. Then I said I would pour out my wrath on them, to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness. Okay, Ezekiel 22:8. You have despised my holy things and have profaned my Shabbatot. Verse 26. Her Kohanim have done violence to my law, priests, have done violence to my law and have profaned my holy things. They've made no distinction between the holy and the common, neither have they caused men to discern between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Shabbatot, and I am profaned among them. Now let me ask you something. Are you discerning? Is counterfeit Christianity, are they discerning between the unclean and the clean? No. How is it so easy to live in this world? I would like to know. How is it so easy to live here? How is it that God's people have not felt a need to go live in some remote place where they don't have to be involved with the rest of the world? Why aren't they doing business together so that they don't have to, so that they can actually observe God's Sabbaths and not be beholden to pagans? This is a mess. It's a mess. I hate the fact that we are in this situation and have to be so alienated in our respective situations. It's just so bad. And now that we're discerning when God's Sabbath, when his Sabbaths are, it's becoming very apparent. Like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to continue to work at jobs and just tell our employer, well, this for the next 4 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks. Yeah. For the next 4 weeks, I'm going to have to take Tuesday off. And then next month I'm going to have, and then the following 4 weeks, I'm going to have to take, I don't know, Thursday off. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how are we going to do that? Because it's become, like, it was hard enough to be able to say, I'm going to need to take Saturdays off because Saturday is a Sabbath, or Sunday, or whatever it is that we believed was Sabbath. It was hard enough to do that with our employers. Now, this changes things, right? This is a whole different ballgame. And it's become very difficult for Christians to live in this world. And you know what God says? That those who do not receive the mark of the beast are not going to be able to buy or sell. You should be able to see that coming. You should be able to see right now that it's become very difficult for Christians to even hold a job and continue to have this sign between them and God. We have people in the body right now praying about this. I'm praying for you. I'm concerned. I mean, I don't have an employer, so this does not affect me in the same way that it affects some of you. I have concern for you because you must keep his Sabbath. But what is this going to look like? So each has to take this up with God. I know that, but I do have concern for you guys. Okay, here in Hosea 2:11, there is also another prophecy, just like Lamentations 2:6, that says, I will also cause all her celebrations to cease, her feast days, her new moons, her Shabbatot, and all her solemn assemblies. Do you guys realize that? Like, this is in prophecy, that this was going to cease, that we were going to lose this, and now we're trying to find our way back. And God, in his graciousness and goodness, is revealing wisdom, revealing understanding so that we can actually do this. The last context that I want to read is Amos 8:5, saying, so God is rebuking the people for saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell grain, and the Shabbat, that we may market wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel large, and dealing falsely with balances of deceit. So again, you see that he has set the new moon in reference to the Sabbath or the Shabbat, and he is rebuking for people wanting to, like, they couldn't wait to go back to work, to the work of their own hands. And you see in here that in the work of their own hands, they're cheating one another. If God wanted to just rebuke you for cheating one another, then why would that have anything to do with new moon and Shabbat? He could just say, stop cheating one another. But he's rebuking them both for wanting to go back to work on what has been ordained as a Sabbath, as a rest day, and they can't wait to go back to that work just so they can cheat each other. It's repulsive. It's disgusting. I hope this study has been helpful to you. Please always discern whatever I say with God, and share also what God is revealing to you.